Welcome back, guys, or if it's your first time watching one of my videos, my name's Chris and I'm back here again today at the Sawmill. In my quest to learn as much about sawmilling as possible, if you've watched one of my more recent videos, you've probably seen me kind of showing you the drying process, particularly the cherry that I've had drying. A lot of it splitting and cracking. So I've been trying to learn a lot more about that process, the drying process, how to do a better job at that. And one of the things that goes kind of hand in hand with that is learning about moisture content in the wood. What's that all about? What does that mean? And that's kind of one of the little rabbit holes that I've gone down recently, trying to learn as much about the moisture content in lumber as possible and how to interpret what that means. So basically, I'm not an expert, so I just want to throw that out there as I usually do. I'm somebody who's trying to learn as much about all this stuff as possible, and I thought that I'd bring you guys along for the ride for what I'm learning, so that maybe some of what I've learned can help you, or on the flip side, maybe if you know some things that I don't, you can leave a comment and let me know. So guys, the reason that I have been diving into trying to learn about this water content, moisture content so much is because I have recently purchased this little tool. It is a 2-in-1 moisture meter from Dr. Meter. Nothing too extravagant. I picked this up for 30 bucks Canadian. It didn't break the bank, so I figured I would go test this one out. And of course, I'm going to be doing a little test here after I explain a little bit of information, because obviously when you put this into the wood, it's going to give you a moisture reading. But if you don't know what you're looking at, then you have no idea what this is actually telling you. So that's why you kind of need to do a bit of research to know what the numbers mean. So I'm going to go through that, and then right after that we're going to go test out the moisture content of some of this lumber that I have cut around here. So not to get too scientific on anybody, but I just want to throw a term out there I've learned. It's called hygroscopic. Hopefully I am pronouncing that right. And wood is a hygroscopic material, and all that basically means in layman's terms is that it has the ability to lose moisture content or gain moisture content. So for example, if you cut down a green tree, it's probably going to have about the highest moisture content it ever will have, and the longer you leave it out, the more it will dry and lose that moisture content. Where on the flip side, if you have a board that's been up in your attic for 20 years, it's probably extremely dried out. If you throw it out in the rain or something like that, it has the ability to actually gain moisture content. So that's all that means. So the reason I bring that up is because I think it's important to understand that the moisture level, humidity level in any given environment is always changing. It's never just, one set specific number. So once you get your wood into equilibrium with your environment, it kind of tries to stay there. So if it gets more humid, your wood's going to gain a bit of moisture content. If it gets drier, your wood's going to lose a bit of moisture content. So for example, if you know what I'm talking about, some of you might have, say, a wooden door in your house where sometime during the year it might kind of get sticky. It rubs against the door frame, and you're wondering why it's getting so hard to close, and then a month or two later it's back to working perfectly normal. Well, there could be a couple different explanations, but one of the most likely is that during that time of year it's getting more humid, your door's accepting some more moisture content from the humidity in the air, and that actually makes your door swell up a little bit, which makes it actually bigger in size, and that's why it rubs on the frame. So that's just one example of kind of the wood adapting to the environment around it when it's getting more moisture in the air, and it actually gains a bit of moisture content in the wood. So before I go too much further in the video, I want to say I've got a lot of the information I'm going to put out from a website called Wagner Meters. They're in the business of measuring moisture content and whatnot, so I figured it was a good resource to use. And on top of that, the website that I was looking at laid it out very simplistically so that even somebody like me could understand it pretty easily. So that's kind of where I'm getting a lot of my information from, and a lot of the numbers that I'm going to be using are off that website. So from this point on, when I'm throwing out numbers about moisture content in wood and what's acceptable and not acceptable, I think it's really important to keep in mind that everything I'm gonna say is kind of like an average. And the reason I want that to be clear is because this is just one of those things where there's no perfect answer, perfect percentages for everybody, because it, like I was mentioning before, it really depends on the moisture content or the relative humidity level in your area. So there's some areas of the world even that are just a lot more humid all the time than other areas. So if you're living in a rainforest, the acceptable amount of moisture in your wood is going to be a lot higher than if you're living in a desert somewhere. So that's just kind of the idea that I'm getting around. So the numbers I'm using are kind of like an average, but if you live somewhere that's a lot more humid or a lot drier, then that's going to affect these numbers quite a bit. So the moisture content in fresh cut wood, so if you cut a tree down, a living tree right now, what's the moisture content going to be in that? And the numbers that I've came up with are anywhere between 40 and 200%. And that 200% kind of jumped out at me like maybe it is to you, so I definitely looked into how that was possible, and it's a pretty simple explanation really. And let me just read this because it's kind of a tricky one, but it's calculated by the weight of the water in the wood divided by the weight of the wood itself with no water in it. So if you think about it that way, it is possible for the weight of the water in the wood to be more than the weight of the wood itself. So you wouldn't think it, but if you have a 2 pound block of firewood and once it's done drying out, it only weighs, half a pound. That's a bit of an extreme example, but you've dried 1.5 pounds of water out of that block of wood, so there was technically more weight in water than there was weight in wood. So that's how the moisture content can actually be above 100% for fresh cut wood. All right, so I know there's a lot of people out there on YouTube that love doing the green lumber building thing. I know I do it also. Some of these numbers that I have here kind of make you think twice about making sure you're only going to be doing that on certain projects. So I'll get into this and let you know what I'm talking about. It says that above 15% moisture level in the lumber you're using can cause corrosion in your metal fasteners if you're using metal fasteners, which most people do, I think. And if it's above 20% or more moisture, it actually starts reducing the strength of your dimensional lumber. So studies have shown that 20% moisture content can cause a 5% nail shank diameter loss within 4 years and a 25% loss within 30 years. It can cause up to a 40% loss in joint strength. So basically, if you're above 20% moisture content or above, it can significantly reduce the shear strength of exterior walls. So I think in a nutshell, basically what this is saying is if you're going to be building something that's really like structural, you know, like a house or a two-story building or something, you might really want to reconsider using, you know, really wet lumber. If it's something else that's just going to be outside and isn't going to have to be around for, you know, 20 or 30 years, maybe there's not really a big problem with doing it. Of course, it's going to shrink a lot, but you know, there's a lot of projects that you don't need it to be structurally sound. So I get the green lumber building. I like doing it too, but just keep in mind those statistics and why you might not want to be doing something with it that you're going to be living in, kind of thing, or relying on to be really structurally sound. That's all. So I'll just state again, keep in mind these numbers are kind of an average, so depending where you're living on, they might be slightly different. But if you're going to be indoors, so if it's for furniture like a coffee table, kitchen cabinets, stuff like that, you want the moisture content to be between 6 and 9%, depending on the relative humidity. For exterior building projects, you want the moisture to be between 9 and 14%. So it says a lot of building materials that you buy, say at Home Depot or something like that, are usually dried down to about 15%. So in another study I read, not study, in another spot I looked, it says for interior projects 6 to 8%, flooring 6 to 9%. So like if you were going to be putting down hardwood flooring or something like that, 6 to 9%, and for outdoor construction projects 9 to 14%. So basically the same thing. And it says the best practice is, before you're going to be doing one of these projects, is to let the wood come into a natural equilibrium with the humidity and the environment around it. So if you just bring wood right in and start building with it and it's way off on the moisture content compared to the environment around it, there's a whole host of problems that you can run into. They include warping, cracking, buckling, diminishing wood strength, corrosion of fasteners, and even fungal growth. So that's straight from the website. Okay, so that's kind of the numbers that I have. Hopefully that makes sense now that I know what kind of moisture content we're looking at to be able to build outdoor stuff or build furniture. I'm not expecting anything I have laying here outside to be within those parameters, but I'm still kind of interested to go around and check out the moisture content of some of the different wood I have laying around here, and maybe I'll compare some of the stuff that I've had cut for a longer amount of time and see if it's drier than stuff that I've cut just recently. So just a brief little description on how this works. You can see the top flips up and there's these two little metal prongs. You just turn it on, stick that into the wood, and it will give you a moisture percentage reading on the screen here. So the way this works is when you turn this on, it sends not like a small electrical current through it, and when it's in the wood, it measures the resistance to the electrical current. And because water conducts electricity and wood does not, the drier the wood is, the more resistance to the electrical current there will be, and that is how this can produce a number based on the amount of resistance to the electrical current. So for the sake of trying to get accurate measurements, I do know that the very end of these boards are going to be by far drier than in a bit, just because the ends dry out so much faster. So I am going to sacrifice a little bit by just cutting in with the chainsaw on the end of each board that I'm going to measure, just to try to get a little bit more accurate of a reading. So this is all some cedar 2x4s that I have just recently cut, so I would expect the moisture content to be relatively high in these ones. As you saw, I cut the end off one of them just to get maybe a bit better reading of what's going on inside it, but let's test out a few of these and see what the moisture meter is saying. So here's the one that I cut the end off of, and you know, 21.5%, 32, 32, 32, 32, 31, 32. So that's to be expected. This is all stuff that I have just recently cut, so obviously it's going to be pretty wet, and yeah, that's what it is, about 32% moisture. Coming over here, here's some 1-inch boards that have been here for quite a while, so let's see if maybe they're a bit drier. That's what I would expect, but I don't know. Of course, I haven't cut them in half or anything, so there's probably more moisture in the middle, but I've got 26, 24, 24. Well, that one's a lot worse. 45, 49. So some of them are drier and some of them are wetter. But it seems like a lot of this cedar that I have outside right now is in the 30% range. Let's see, some of this cherry, I cut this kind of scrap block of cherry. It's from the same log, so it should be relatively you know, in the same moisture area. So let's check this out and see how it's been doing. This is hard to do with the camera. So that's actually doing surprisingly well at 15. That's actually got me kind of optimistic. $24, $24, $24. So 28, that's more like what I was expecting. I guess just the end of this one, because it's in the sun so much, it probably has dried out a bit. But yeah, I'd say after I got down into a bunch of the other ones, that's more like what I was expecting. Still has a long way to go. When I was seeing those 12s and 15s, that got me excited for a minute, but it wasn't to be. I don't think it would be dry that quick just sitting outside like this, but you know, it's on its way. Let's check out a few other things. Here's a few more boards of cherry, and this is actually a bit newer, so it's all around the 30% range, which is to be expected. This stuff is some of the first stuff that I ever cut, so I was kind of wondering if it might be a bit drier, but doesn't look like it. Ooh, that one's really wet. We've also had a ton of rain around here lately, so that might have a bit to do with it, but Well, I hope you enjoyed that, or maybe found it a little bit informative. I know that I've learned a lot over the past little while looking into moisture content and what that's all about. And as you could see, I tested out quite a bit of the lumber that I have stacked around here and found out what I suspected, which is it's not really dry enough for furniture making or anything like that. I expected that. There's no reason that it would be, especially a lot of the hardwood. It hasn't been sitting around here very long, and a lot of the 2x4s and cedar that I've cut, it also hasn't been sitting around very long. A lot of it gets used not too long after I cut it, but you know, I'm glad that I looked into this a little bit more. A lot of the wet cedar and stuff, you know, I guess it's not ideal to be using it with 30% moisture content, but a lot of it's used around the farm just to shore stuff up, and if it shrinks or falls off in 10 or 15 years, that's kind of just what's going to happen. And I got a sawmill here, so we'll just put up fresh boards. But it is nice to know, have that moisture meter. I don't foresee us building any two-story homes or, you know, walls that need to hold up trusses or anything like that in the near future, but it is nice to have that moisture meters and just to kind of give yourself a good idea of what the moisture content in the wood is. And for the cherry that I have, it is something that you know, I'm probably going to be using to make some kind of furniture. I haven't decided what yet. That's probably still a ways in the future, but judging by that having almost 30% moisture content, it is going to be a while before that dries down. I'm also probably, from what I've learned in the past little while, not doing myself any favors by just having it sitting outside like this. So I'm probably going to have to find an alternate solution to get it under a roof where it can actually dry down a lot better than it is out here. But anyways, guys, that's kind of where I'm at with that. I hope you found that somewhat informative if you weren't up on your moisture contents in lumber. Anyways, thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you next time.